So look, the Beach Brothers Show is a show where we deal with Virginia business and politics.
Well, I'm Conrad Chesviner. I'm a Hampton West political activist. Best ideas for community improvement happen to drive me.
I help folks that are approaching retirement and in their retirement years.
I have what I call the empowerment agenda. And that means that everything I do is focused on empowerment. You want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seiko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. Yeah, time to get beachy. Time to get beachy. Bro Conrad, where you at? How are you doing, Conrad?
I'm doing very well. It's a great Thursday night here on the beach. I'm glad to settle down and settle in for some good topics, good policy.
Good stuff, good stuff. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. This has been spring break for most of the Virginia Beach area. So there have been little ones running everywhere in the streets. It's been interesting. Not to say that has not been going on during the pandemic. So I know they were supposed to be on that Zoom meeting, that Zoom classroom, but I saw them in the streets very often. So it's going to be interesting. I know that back in the beach, they're back into in-person school, and in Norfolk, those students are going to go to in-person school primarily on the 26th of April. But hey, it's time to get kicking with the podiums. You first or me first?
Sure, I'll go first. Tuesday night, I signed up for Virginia Beach City Council's open mic, and that's something that only happens on the first meeting of the month. And like always, it wasn't broadcast on the city's live stream, and it should be. Remember, it should be. They need to fix that for the sake of transparency. But what I wanted to speak on was gun violence. Specifically, I wanted to address it through hypocrisy on the city's part. Here's what I mean. In 2019, the city jumped on e-scooters. They took them to task for injury concerns of scooter riders. Council members like Jim Wood and Mayor Bobby Dyer spoke on their threat to the community, and that was why they voted to ban e-scooters. And the council that night voted effectively to ban them in Virginia Beach. So in that moment in time, the city council of Virginia Beach was on record wanting to ban a device designed to transport people because of public safety. Later that year, and into the next January of 2020, City Council took up proposals by friend of the Beach Brothers Show, Councilwoman Sabrina Wooten, to ban firearms in municipal buildings. The public hollered, and City Council blustered. They put forth a public resolution calling Virginia Beach a constitutional city, a public spectacle designed to give the appearance that Virginia Beach is a sanctuary for gun rights, set against any future movement to curtail guns. Keep in mind, this was half a year after the city had a very public and exceptionally horrifying mass shooting by a legal gun owner inside a city municipal building. So to have council do such a pro-gun act while one of their associates was trying to pass a resolution to curtail guns in city buildings like that, not a few months after publicly banning e-scooters because of safety concerns, was simultaneously insulting and hypocritical, especially considering guns are designed to be used to injure and kill while scooters are not. This brings me to the recent Virginia Beach shooting at the Oceanfront, and it involved an officer whom unfortunately killed someone who may or may not have himself had a gun, all the while the police did not have their camera on. This was set in a moment of chaos because another shooting was happening at that time in the Oceanfront by third parties. Gun violence in the city springs from a sort of gun culture, and we have a city council that doesn't care to address that culture, but they do care to sort of embrace it and flaunt their support of the police in the face of needed reforms of the police as well. So people like all of us need to call them out on their collective hypocrisy, and that's tonight's podium from me.
All right. That's interesting, man. Even your podium got some comments today. All right. We have Courtney Roxanne who brings up an interesting point. If you want to talk about gun violence, you need to talk about the whole issue that happened that night. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good point. Good point. We'll bring that up. As good brother of the show, friend of the show says, so bad guys can carry schools, but the good guys can't.
Did he mean in schools or something? I don't know what he means regarding the schools part, but I think I understand what he means about the good guy with the gun versus criminalizing them. I know.
Right. You know. And then the good brother also says, what the scooters have to deal with guns.
I explained the point.
The point where you explained it. So,
I know.
Hey, but we need to get Luis back on.
Yeah.
Do you honestly think bad guys will follow the law?
No.
Not all the time.
In theory, that's what makes them bad guys.
Not all the time. That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, my platform is in some ways similar, but it really kind of has to deal with empowerment. So, Officer Muhammad Noir accidentally killed a woman in Minnesota. He was charged with murder and given a 45-year sentence. He was charged with murder and given a 45-year sentence. Akai Gurley was killed. And when Akai Gurley was killed, that officer was charged. That officer was sentenced. That officer was then somehow allowed to have, home. Here we go. Yeah. Officer Peter Liang accidentally shot Akai Gurley. He first was arrested, first charged with murder. Then the community, in specific, the Chinese American community, in larger form, the Asian community, got on code and they pressured the courts and they pressured officials. It repealed the court decision, and it turned out that after all the pressure that was applied by the Asian community, the Chinese community in particular, he ended up with home arrest and community service. The situation was he was entering with a fellow officer a darkened hallway. They had their guns drawn. He shot for no reason. It ricocheted off a wall and killed Akai Gurley. Community service and home arrest. Why? Is there a difference? The difference, I would say, deals with getting on code. The difference, one organization, one group decided that they were going to pressure, they were going to compel, they were going to speak their words, and they were going to right a wrong in their minds. So, I think If you see something in the community that disturbs you, you can get on code. You can gather people around. You can help lead a charge to make sure that justice prevails. The court made a decision. Peter Liang, the community rose up, they pressured, they compelled, and things changed. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the community decision, but I do agree that they got on code and things changed. So my point, my platform today is to get on code, get with those who were interested in making change, because you can make change. They overturned a murder conviction for somebody who was guilty. And unfortunately, another community allowed it to happen. But if you see a wrong that needs to be righted, if you see something that needs to be changed, gather up your troops and make that change. America is replete with examples of people doing that very same thing. So get on code. And that's my platform for today.
Let's go one.
So who do we have today with us, Brother Conrad?
Well, tonight we're going to highlight a great Richmond public servant. He's a certified mental health professional. He graduated Virginia State University. He stood up to Dominion Energy's proposed pipeline, which would have dangerously influenced the historic Black community of Union Hill. He is founder and CEO of Bridging the Gap in Virginia, a nonprofit established in 2009 with the mission to empower ex-offenders, veterans, persons in alcohol, substance abuse recovery, and those impacted by chronic homelessness. He is a strident grassroots public advocate, and he's running to represent Richmond City and win the 71st District's delegate seat to the Virginia General Assembly. He is Mr. Richard Walker. Mr. Walker, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Conrad. I appreciate you guys for inviting me in on your show tonight. I'm listening to your commentary, and it's a good show.
Thank you very much. We love to have you and talk about the good stuff in Virginia. And we note that you're running against Mr. Delegate Jeff Bourne over in Richmond, and you have years as a public advocate. So can you fill in some of the gaps I may have missed in your public advocacy? We'd like to know a little bit deeper history of what you have and are doing in public service.
As a direct result of my former incarceration, when I came back to Virginia from prison, I found out about Virginia's laws of individuals' rights to vote, that they were taken from you, when you committed a crime, a felony. And then also I got kind of angry because I've never heard of such stuff. And I'm from New Jersey. I voted every year since I turned 18 in every election. And then I get to Virginia, and then they have the right to supersede the Constitution of the United States. I was floored by that. So that's when I began my mission to help change that issue alone, because it directly affected me. So I applied to get my rights restored twice through former Governor Bob McDonnell. Then I finally was granted my rights back in 2012. I started, and then as a result of me coming out of prison seeking employment, and mind you, this is with a college degree and 10 years of middle management experience. I couldn't get in gainful employment. They were judging me based on my criminal background as opposed to my skills, my knowledges, and my abilities. So that put me on a mission. In 2009, that's when I started the organization Bridging the Gap in Virginia, because I knew individuals that have less than a high school diploma coming out of prison, what challenges and barriers that they would be facing, as a result of the challenges and barriers that I face, and that's with a college degree. So that got me initially involved in doing advocacy, seeing the systemic racism in the Commonwealth of Virginia as well. That prompted me to get busy, get involved. Ultimately in 2000, I started a nonprofit in 2009. in 2012, 13, that's when I confronted some issues within the City Council of Richmond. The Richmond School Board, individuals that sought my support because they were turned down for positions with the transportation for the Richmond Public Schools, as a direct result of misdemeanor charges that they had. And my first advocacy was against the Richmond School Board, where they told me that these individuals committed a crime of moral turpitude, and that's why they couldn't get hired. So by the time I was done with Richmond School Board, when I ended my conversation with them, I said, as far as I'm concerned, you folk are committing a crime of moral turpitude by denying these people employment. So then they changed their policy that anyone that had a misdemeanor, regardless of what it was, that was 5 years or older, they would be eligible for employment with the Richmond Public Schools in transportation. So from that point forward, that's when I became very involved in the policies and legislation and ordinances within the state of Virginia. I connected with an individual, her name is Lily Branch Kennedy with RIHD, and we sought to eliminate the issue with restoration of rights. I have been going around throughout the state, what we formulated, collaborate on what we call the mobile justice tour. And we began to mobilize people in various locations. I also was involved in changing the ordinance of ban the box, which is that on the application where it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? We got it changed. It initiated in Newport News, Virginia. And then I received the paperwork and provided the ordinance to Richmond City Council. And then they ended up banning the box on their city applications. Then it spread from there to Norfolk, to Portsmouth, to Chesapeake, to Virginia Beach, Charlottesville. Currently, there are 20 municipalities that have banned the box. And as a result of getting my rights restored, that's when I started advocating for automatic voting rights. Mm-hmm. And that began a 10-year plus up until this point of most recent legislation. Because I felt that Virginia had no right to take anyone's civil rights away from them based on a felony conviction. So I've been fighting that for the past 10 years, and we finally saw some daylight with this governor who signed a executive order with the pending amendment of the automatic rights restoration. So that is a plus that I'm excited about. Of course, you mentioned the Union Hill, Buckingham County fight against or advocacy against Dominion, where they wanted to use my family's land to connect from the current Transco pipeline to the proposed Atlantic Coast pipeline and compressor station. So they wanted a portion of my family's property to make that connection so they could continue to distribute the gas coming from fossil fuels through Transco. So we fought them. We fought them all the way. It was a 6-year fight, a 6-year battle that we ultimately won. That land that they wanted to trespass on through eminent domain, and my family's has been in my family for over 130 years. The land was purchased by my great-great-grandfather by his slave owner. And then the adjacent land was purchased by my great-grandfather, who purchased it from the son of the original slave owner that my great-great-grandfather came under. So when it was all said and done, they stuck their tails between their legs and they hauled tail up out of there. Yeah, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, they vacated all their permits, and at that point in time, they had no other alternative. And that was a major victory. I'm involved now with all of the MVP, the Southgate issue, the C4 issue, down in Charles City. So I've become a very staunch environmentalist at this point. Between environmental justice issues, criminal justice issues, I currently house individuals down in your area in Tidewater, Newport News, and Hampton. I have currently at least 11 guys that I help get released from prison that are being housed in Newport News and in Hampton. We have 4 houses between those 2 communities. And most of these guys are geriatrics that have spent 20, 30, 40 years in prison. And I go down and I do case management because I am a licensed mental health support specialist. So I'm able to work with them and do case management with them upon their release from incarceration. I have some donors in Lexington, Virginia, and in Harrisonburg, Virginia, that provide the first 2 months rent for these guys. I assist them pick up the slack from when they are released from prison, and they initiate the paperwork for Social Security, and I help complete it. So they're getting 2 months of buying time before their monthly Social Security checks kick in. So they'll be able to become self-sufficient and maintain their own bills, pay their own rent, and be able to take care of themselves. So it's been an awesome ride knowing that I've been able to help. In fact, I have 2 individuals coming out, one on the 14th that spent 39 years in prison, and then another one on the 22nd that spent 27 years in prison. So, and that's an issue which will probably be, once I get in office, will be a part of my agenda, my platform, or legislation that I will promote, is judicial oversight. All right. Virginia has a history of the judges going above and beyond the sentencing guidelines for individuals on their convictions, on their sentencing. And there needs to be something to put in place that these judges can't willy-nilly, give out 35 years when the sentencing guideline calls for 5. That they can't give out life on top of life when the sentencing guidelines calls for 20 years. A judge could have been upset with his wife that morning and then get in court and give this man 35 years just because he's angry at his wife. So there's a lot of oversight that is needed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Department of Corrections, there was a bill there for an ombudsman for oversight for Virginia Department of Corrections. I will push that legislation as well when I get in office. It got killed in the Senate this past session, but I am looking forward to going back in there, to getting in there and pushing that bill. The Department of Corrections is an entity in themselves. The Director of Public Safety and Homeland Security has no say-so on what goes on in Virginia Department of Corrections. The governor has no say-so on what goes on with VDOC, Virginia Department of Corrections. So they have a monopoly or a dictatorial type system that no other entity can interfere with the decision-making processes that go on in the Department of Corrections. And it has to stop. It has to stop. We've been calling on the governor with the COVID going on. I'm a part of a group called the COVID-19 Coalition for Justice that we've been trying to hold them accountable because they initially said those that have less than a year left on their sentence, they were going to release them. They haven't done completely that. 2,000 individuals, they're upwards of maybe 1,400. They were looking at a compassion legislation that came forth in a special session that based on compassion for individuals that are 60, 70 years old or older, for compassion and have them released because they're no harm to themselves or to society. The prison system is off at a sync. The recidivism rate is low. Virginia, based on the numbers that they gave, has the lowest recidivism numbers in the country, under 17%, but, that's based on however they plugged in the numbers. That's from any individual that's been out for 3 years. But what about the individuals who've been out for 2 years, or individuals who've been out for 1 year, or individuals who've been out for 5 years? This is based on individuals being released after 3 years. That recidivism level is at 17%. That made them or gave them the characteristic of being, the lowest recidivism rate in the country, in the nation. So there's a lot of issue. Affordable housing. There's a brand new subdivision in Richmond, but right across the street is the housing projects that have been, unlivable. Where they had to put people out and put people in hotels because of issues with heating and issues of clean water. So a lot of that has to change, and I'm that guy that's going to go in there and look to change the narrative in Virginia. The incumbent, as I've been traveling around in the city, and I asked individuals, I said, well, do you know who your current delegate is? They don't have a clue. Jeff Bourne got in office on his first term back in 2017 as through osmosis. Okay, he walked in there. He had he didn't have to run a campaign in 2017. Okay, as a result of Jennifer McClellan moving into the Senate seat, they appointed him, they ordained him, and put him in position in the House of Delegates representing his district. Then in 2019, there was only 3,500 votes that he needed, that he got in order to move into the office and keep the office back in 2019. So he virtually has gone unchallenged. He is trying to push legislation. He's been in the pockets of approximately 30 or more CEOs and corporations that, he has gotten campaign financing or campaign funding from, so he virtually has yet to do anything to try and hold on to his seat.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So one of the things that is kind of striking me is you seem to be really on code. You're really focused on changing some of the things that need to be changed. But when we look at what the delegates have done, I guess in this year, they really didn't do some of the things we asked for. Why do you think that happened?
Well, what they're imagining is that they're going to be back in office. What they're thinking is that, they're going to hold off on legislation that they presume that basically got kicked down the street a little bit further, that they're going to come back in the next session and then push it, as opposed to going directly to the exact nature of what's going on. And I give you an example. Majority Leader Herring came with this expungement bill. Okay, the expungement bill basically is expunging the records of individuals with misdemeanors. All right, and with the legalization of marijuana, you're going to have a whole bunch of individuals that get locked up for misdemeanor charges that they're going to be allowed to be able to get expunged immediately after being convicted of the misdemeanor and paying a $25 fine. Now, the people that I work with, the people that I assist, that I advocate for, they do not have misdemeanors. They have felony convictions. Those individuals are not recognized in this legislation. Those individuals do not get that support to get their records expunged. Those individuals have been productive members of society for beyond 5, 10, 15, 20 years and can use a leg up to have their records sealed, that they can move forward in life and have a better quality of life. That is not in this bill that went forth with Charnel Herring. That's a bill that I'm going to push when I get in office. I will get in office, and that is one of the immediate bills, the legislation that I will push to make happen. I have folk that I've been working with that have been out of prison for 20 plus years. They're the ones that are not being allowed to have their records expunged. So that bill doesn't go far enough. The legislators that are in there, and that's inclusive of folk in the Legislative Black Caucus as well, they're not, we have the majority in the House, in the Senate, and in the administration. And there's a whole lot of stuff that should have happened to solidify the position of helping the folk that live in communities of color and marginalized communities, whether it be in the inner city or whether it be in rural Virginia. You know, enough has not happened to push legislation for the change that is needed. You know, with the legalization of marijuana, all right, they're not addressing the issues of individuals having a seat at the table, that they may be able to be growers of the marijuana, that they may be able to be distributors of marijuana, that they may be able to have retail sales of marijuana, that entrepreneurship. You know, you have these drug dealers that you lock up, and of course, I'm all for it, that the racial profiling of our youth, that they have been, you know, putting in incarceration behind marijuana law. I'm great. I'm fantastic. I'm glad it is coming into fruition. However, what about the individuals that have been incarcerated with marijuana charges? What's going to happen with them? Are you going to go retroactive and have them resentenced or have them released based on simple possession charges or on small amounts of marijuana? That has not been addressed in this legalization process. You know, will they allow for individuals that black ownership, individuals that can go to the table with green leaf, you know, if they can go with them, they already have licensure for medical marijuana. So what if individuals can go in there and learn the process and be a part of it? And that should be demanded in this legislation, that individuals, people of color, should be allowed to have that be mentored by these Altrias and G-Leaf, that individuals can have a piece of that American dream, the billions of dollars that are going to come back into community. We need primarily a commission, cannabis equity commission that is primarily African-American folk that can have decision-making on the distribution of the revenues that come as a result of the marijuana sales. But specifically, 70%. The state of New Jersey, they legalized marijuana, and 70% of that money is going back into rebuilding these communities. You know, so they need to take a page out of New Jersey and do the same thing in Virginia. Another page they need to take out of New Jersey is the legislation on environmental justice, that no more new fossil fuels or pollutants will be allowed to be constructed or built in communities of color in the state of New Jersey. It needs to happen here. It needs to be a moratorium on any new fossil fuel, any liquid gas, any distribution of fuel, oil, gas, whatever, to come through the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's not that it's going through to the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's going overseas. It's more feeding of the pockets of the fat cats in Virginia, that their monies and their monopolies and control of this state will maintain, as well as those legislators that are also in the pockets of these CEOs and corporations that continue to keep getting permitted by FERC and then the Department of Environmental Quality here in Virginia. You know, but yet they're not doing any type of assessments or any type of reporting on the damages that can happen by any new gas construction, fossil fuel, or fracking, that how they affect primarily communities of color. An impact statement is needed prior to any permits being issued to anybody, and that should start with FERC on down to the Department of Environmental Quality. I'm very passionate about all this. Sorry about that.
I definitely sense that passion there. I appreciate the passion. The people need the passion. You've touched on environmental justice. You've touched on the marijuana first decriminalization, then legalization, and how much we still need to do on that. Can you also touch on sort of the rest of your policies for the people planks and your campaigns? What different parts of policy changing would you like to do?
Well, there's other areas in the education. All right, there's an inequity in education. The kids in Richmond do not have the equal supplies, tools, and mechanisms to be on the same playing field with their white counterparts in the suburbs. That needs to change. They keep talking about the index of the tax index and Richmond is at the same level. No, that's not the issue. The issue is, what about how they're not on the same playing field when it comes to, if it means oversight on these municipalities and their education program, Department of Education or public school system, then that's what needs to happen in order for our children to be equal, on the same page, on the same playing field with their white counterparts outside of the inner cities. More money needs to happen to rebuild schools, provide more computers, laptops. Kids in Henrico County, they have laptops. Children in Richmond don't have laptops. I was in Union Hill. Because of, and I'm going into another subject, it needs to be, and they keep kicking this can down the road for broadband, statewide broadband. I got folk in Union Hill and Buckingham that, through my organization, we provided Wi-Fi for these children so that they can keep up in school with their white counterparts, because they do not have broadband out in rural Union Hill, Buckingham County. But the closer you got to the Buckingham courthouse, those kids had Wi-Fi, but it's not out in the forest rural part of the county. So that needs to happen throughout the entire state. Infrastructure to build broadband throughout the entire state. Another issue is through cooperatives, electric utilities. And most of them are in rural. Particularly Rappahannock, as well as Central Virginia Electric Co-op. The legislation that came out that they have to put back that money that they get from those ratepayers who technically are members. All right, they're not just clients or consumers; they are members of those co-ops. So there should be. That they should be able to put back into these systems, into these communities, the monies that they're getting. If they're getting a profit of $800,000, $1 million, that $1 million needs to be reinvested back into those communities. So that's legislation that needs to be enforced, needs to be held accountable for. Other legislation I'm looking at is, being able to allow individuals to be able to work, receive good, decent paying jobs, be able to have the right to form unions if they so choose to. Virginia, which, I found out afterwards, is a at-will state. So that means that they can hire and fire at will. There are no safeguards on anybody's employment. So my legislation is, by the fact that you continue to allow them to be a state for employment and deny people's rights to work and don't repeal it, what happens when they, as a direct result of this at-will legislation, what recourse do they have with the Virginia Employment Commission? They, as far as that's concerned, it looks like they got fired. So then they have to jump through hoops with VEC in order to get unemployment insurance. But yet the employer has to give no rhyme, rationale, or reason as to why they dismissed them. There's no protections for individuals that work hard, So there's a whole lot of collateral issues that affect primarily communities of color, and it has to stop. It just has to stop. Virginia is You know, like I said, they'd rather kick the can down the road than to deal with the issues at hand. You know.
How about fair housing? Would you like to touch on that?
On what? I'm sorry, I didn't get.
On housing.
Oh, okay. I'm very impassioned about that as well. I ride through Creighton Road here in Richmond. On one side of the road is a brand new housing development, townhouses. On the other side of the road, you have the housing projects, unlivable, deplorable, debilitating, and people living on top of people. Virginia is one of few states that still has housing developments. You know, where I'm from, where I grew up in New Jersey, the city of Newark was like that. But now they have moved away from that, of people sleeping and living on top of each other, where they've had townhouses, and they have different types of housing or means and ways beyond living in housing developments. They want you to use developments, but as far as I'm concerned, if they're not being kept up, they're housing projects, you know, because they're not doing anything. And all of these, what do you call it? Public-private partnerships between the cities and these housing authorities needs to stop. It needs to stop. They need to come under the municipality or come under the state. You know, a lot of funding coming through here, but a lot of it is not going through to create affordable housing. My opponent is real big on a voucher program, that the voucher program will theoretically, you know, will be for the recipient to move into housing, but realistically, that money is going to the contractors. That money is going to the private developers. They're one. Why should we have to continue to pay them when they're already getting tax breaks? They're already getting abatements. They're already getting those privileges that come with building new construction. And they're not allowing or not putting forth individuals that reside in those communities and giving them employment. You know, they're recruiting or shipping or importing individuals from all over the country to work on these projects. It needs to stop. There needs to be more control. You know, like I said, these private-public partnerships are not working.
I really appreciate the passion that you're coming with this, because I think the public servants need to be as passionate as you're portraying here tonight. I'm glad you've been able to touch on a lot of your topics within your planks of the policies for the people. I also understand that I think you have something you're about to go to very soon. But before you go, one of our favorite questions we like to ask our guests from their various parts of Virginia, from where they're at, and you want to represent Richmond City, what is some of the greatness about the city, your favorite things and businesses, parks, places that you love about where you live at?
I live in north side of Richmond, okay? I love the change that is taking place. You know, I see the mixed income of neighborhoods, you know, and it makes a difference, you know. That's why I'm real big on them looking to change affordable housing to decent looking housing. You drive on 95 and you look on one side and you see gorgeous high rises, but then you look on the other side of the road, you see housing developments. Richmond is on the precipice, or Virginia is on the precipice of being a great state. You know, if they conquer the systemic structured racism that's been in existence for 400 plus years, if they can get that out of their system and, you know, in the General Assembly, that will, and embrace the diversity of people in this state, it will make a big difference on the direction that this state goes forward. You know, we have the tourism. We have working on the mass transit. We're looking for meaningful employment. We're looking for climate change. You know, we're looking for renewable energy jobs. We're looking for certifications in areas that most individuals have never been through. But it's that training and workforce development that will make the difference. It's not bringing in a casino. That's not going to make the difference. It's about doing what you have with the people that you have been shunning, that you have not paid attention to for centuries, for decades, and almost 100 years, and not improving their lot, not improving their quality of life. You improve the quality of life of folk, the life of everybody will have better quality. Would make a big difference. Yeah. I just believe Virginia, they can either flip and do better, move forward, or they can go backwards and start reclaiming Jim Crow era. You know, so you know, it's a coin flip, and I just hope there's some other folk like me that believe in what the Commonwealth of Virginia can be.
Thank you for bringing.
Hey, look, brother, I know you have to get off soon. I know you have to get off soon, man. How do we create more people like you?
Good question. I don't know.
And it's not Jersey. It's not just a Jersey thing, man.
That might be it, you know, in my upbringing. But listen, what it's going to take is just what I just said. You know, train them up in order for them to do better. Give them the mindset of knowing that if I get this opportunity, I can move to this level of living. If I get this next opportunity, I can move even forward. So that's where all of these issues come in the General Assembly, like expungements, you know, to give folk to be more productive members of society, to get back into the society of which they live. They give them a shot of hope that their children would look up to and emulate them, you know, and they'll do better in school. You know, that their communities, that, you know, it'll stop a lot of the violence and a lot of the substance abuse, a lot of the drug addiction, you know, if you give an opportunity to individuals to move forward in life. You know, don't just throw them a bone and say, this is what you do, this is how you do it. No, you've got to teach them, you've got to show them, you got to give them by example, you know, of how we can move forward in life. How we can change the atmosphere or change the narrative in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that everybody in the Commonwealth of Virginia can have a lucrative life of employment, and that they can have a part of the American dream, that they do not have to live in poverty, don't have to live in inequities, don't have to live with wondering where their next meal coming from, wondering if they're going to get evicted from their house tomorrow, wondering if their child is not going to be able to get an education, wondering if their child experiences trauma based on the living conditions that they're living in these housing developments. It has to change. Until that happens, Virginia's going to have the same old kicking the can down the road, and they will not move away from it because folk are continuing to allow that can to be kicked.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
I thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
wow.
We thank you for
hey,
coming
man,
on.
we didn't have to, we could just sit back and let him talk. Hey, thank you, good brother.
I appreciate you guys. I thank you.
Thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a great night.
All right. Have a good night. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Take care. Wow. Wow. Yo, Khan, man, we need more politicians. We need more people like him with that passion. Yeah. And then also, he came with strategies. He's like, I don't like what that guy's doing. He should do this. We should do this. This will help this.
And it also didn't seem like he was trying to do any bashing so much as using the word critique. He was thinking he's got a better idea, and that's why I'm running. He also has just so much caring for each of the topics he was talking about. And it showed that, I think, compared to a lot of people in Virginia, they don't care as much. Caring is the first step.
You know, what's interesting is I had a conversation with one of my frat brothers, Root to the Brus, and in that conversation, they were like, well, Cinco, no, you're qualified, and I understand why you run, why I understand why you ran for office, but this guy here, and I'm not going to mention the candidate's name, this guy here, he has no background. And I had to say, you know, look, the qualifications are this, and this. He meets the qualifications. He said, but I want to have somebody who at least gone to college. That's like, brother, that's not the case.
Doesn't matter.
You meet the qualifications. And moreover, we need people with a lot of diverse backgrounds to really look at a situation from a lot of different aspects, a lot of different angles. What I like about Richard is his experience with America's injustice system really has opened his eyes as to some things that can be done differently. You know, one of the things that I take issue with is that administrations often are looking for outsiders to come in and make America better, looking for outsiders to come in and make Virginia better, looking for outsiders to come in and make Virginia Beach better, to make Norfolk better, Suffolk, Hampton, Newport News, P-Town, Portsmouth, Suffolk. While we have the resources within, and very often it seems like policy is more apt to bring in others from the outside instead of bolstering and improving and securing those who are here on the inside. And so it looks to me like his strategies, if employed, and I really hope he wins, are more focused on helping Virginians make Virginia better. You know what I'm saying?
And the ones who need it the most. Because as he said, he touched on toward the end, anyone, if you're trying to think about Virginia as a whole, and you just try to have very broad things that you try to help, and it might actually dilute some of the effectiveness if you think too broadly. Because if you try to help the people who need the help the most, that is like the foundation of society. And if you strengthen that, the entire building is going to be better.
True. Hey, I wanted to end with going back to one of the comments from Courtney. You know, we kind of flashed it on the screen very quickly. And she said, if you want to talk about gun violence, you need to talk about the whole issue that happened that night. It was more than a cop shot someone. There were several suspects that night that had bought their guns illegally and then used it in gang activity. Interesting point.
That's the official story. I do put it in quotes because we don't get a chance to investigate the people doing the investigating as much. But yeah, as we found out a couple days later in various news reports that they were very young. I think the oldest of the people arrested was only like 22. And they had gotten guns illegally. But that would be sort of the point of the overall gun culture. Why did they feel like they wanted not only to have them, so much of them, hang out with others that had them, and then bring it to the beach? What are you doing if you're just hanging out at the oceanfront if you're all with a gun? And that also reminds me of Mr. Donovan allegedly had a gun as well. Why did he feel he needed it at that time? And if possible, and I made this point on Facebook, we need to address the issue that maybe the idea of a good guy with a gun could have also have applied to Mr. Donovan that night. Maybe he, in that moment, felt like he needed his own protection. And he was presented at a moment with a officer who may have thought he was a threat simply because he saw a gun. So there was a threat of law enforcement because they are armed. And then there's the community at hand who are themselves armed. It's just too much of both sides being scared of the other and then having weapons to do something based on their fear. And that's something worth analyzing.
There's a lot to look into with this situation. I guess the thing that disturbs me the most is no footage.
Yes.
No footage. No
in a
footage.
very big area with not guns, but cameras. Atlantic Avenue, a lot of cameras. Pacific Avenue, also cameras. That's the area that had a lot of businesses. You would think that a lot of the streetlights would have cameras too. I think they had pictures of some of the suspects from freeze frames of that night, but not of the area of the shooting that the stray bullet killed that one lady. I forgot her name. And Mr. Donovan's encounter with the police officer, not only so much his own camera, which should have been on, but just from the scene around him.
Well, I think if there were earlier events that involved illegal activity, illegal guns,
Yeah.
gunfire, why wouldn't that officer, because he's already dealing with a bunch of situations that possibly were, harmful to the community. So, and I say possibly because we really don't know at this point.
In this instance,
I'll say this.
This is
I'll
the
say
type of
this.
thing we would want go.
Well, I'll say this. I'm not opposed to oversight,
Mhm.
but it seems that the overseers are opposed to oversight.
That's
something that we have to change. That's something that we have to change. So if you live in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Suffolk, Portsmouth, Hampton, Newport News, who did I miss? Chesapeake, Williamsburg.
Mhm.
If your city does not have a citizens review panel with investigatory and subpoena power, work to change that.
Yes, it's
Work
people that I have to
change
push them.
that. Well, Brother Walker talked about judicial oversight.
Mhm.
If one of the things in our great democracy is checks and balances, where there's something to counterbalance something, then that should happen in all forms of the government, particularly the part of the government that protects and serves a portion of the citizenry. So we need to push for oversight. So if you live in the 7 cities and beyond, start pushing for oversight just to make sure that everything is done right. And the great thing about oversight, as I walk in classes and I see students answering questions correctly, when I'm providing that sense of oversight, I congratulate them. When I see them struggling with something, I can provide them some support.
Mhm.
When I see that they're really off base and they're not paying attention, I can say, hey, I need you to get focused. But when they're doing right, when they're really engaged, I can celebrate them. And I think oversight, once fully embraced, will give us more opportunity to celebrate those who need to be celebrated and to punish those who need to be punished.
Mhm.
And that's it. That's my my post podium.
Second podium, stepping back onto the podium. I would agree.
Good stuff. All right. So Courtney, thank you for your point. Luis,
We need to have him on
hey,
again
bro.
someday.
Yeah, come back on, man. Come back on.
Perhaps he could be.
Yeah,
perhaps he could be a guest host if we have like another Republican on or something like that. We could be like, hey, join the club, have fun with us that night.
I know Luis has a story to tell. All right, brother. Love you, man. Love Virginia. 2 up and 2 down for VA.
Hey, before we go, everyone's gotten their cars all covered in pollen, and if you see your car that you might want to change, remember to head on over to Southern Volkswagen, stop by, see Charlie Roy, find a nice car that you'll drive safe in, even though it's going to be covered in pollen a couple days later. But still stop by Southern Volkswagen in Chesapeake, 1248 South Military Highway. Say hi to Charlie Roy.
It's never too early or too late to plan for retirement. Let me show you how to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your assets from loss due to catastrophic decisions that may affect you the rest of your life. Please call me.
Salute to the good brother, Jose Cruz, one of our good beach brothers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any last words, comrade?
I enjoyed tonight. It was filled with passion, and I hope you guys have as much passion as Mr. Richard Walker has.
Ashe. This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes. We do tax resolution. We lend private money and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.